Have you seen me dice bag? The Grognard Files.
Hello, my name is Dirt the Dice, and this is the Grognard Files podcast, talking bobbins about tabletop RPGs from back in the day and today. This is part 2 of episode 22, which is all about RuneQuest. It's not so much a follow-up, it's more like a collectible codex. This episode is launched on the 3rd anniversary of the GrogPod, and what's encouraged me the most about producing this bobbins over the years has been hearing the stories of how listeners have started playing again, or how they've discovered new old games after listening to us banging on about them. RuneQuest is no exception. I'm really pleased to have more Mob in this part. He brings us up to date with the recent release of RuneQuest Glorantha and shares Chaosium's plans for how the line is going to develop. Hopefully, you'll be encouraged to discover the world of Glorantha through RuneQuest. It's existed for over 50 years, and RuneQuest was first released 40 years ago, and since then there's been copious amounts of material produced for the setting. Lots of people are discouraged by the sheer volume of background material. People want to do it right, and feel that unless they know the gods, the myths, the battles, the heroes, and the micro details, Glorantha cannot be enjoyed. Blythy joins me in the room of role-playing rambling to share tips on how to get started and get playing in Glorantha. Earlier this year, I played RuneQuest with Glorantha skeptic Baz from the Smart Party. He was put off by basket weaving and kite flying, but along with his counterpart Gaz from the Smart Party podcast and Matt Hart from Steamforged Games, we did the Emmy Award-winning quick start adventure The Broken Tower. I've included here a short actual play, a Diana Jones Award-winning actual play. That's how that works, isn't it? After that, Just Blythy returns and we discuss the creation of his very first character for RuneQuest G. I'll be at the end with an anniversary hobnob, and you might need it because it's another big one. Ramblers, let's get rambling.
More Mob!
Okay, welcome back to Mob. Hello, Mob.
Hey, Dirk. What are we going to talk about now?
3 years ago, I launched this podcast, and the first episode I did was about RuneQuest because it had such an impact on me as a gamer back in the early 80s. And in that opening podcast, I was telling the news of Moon Design buying into the management of Chaosium and their plans to return RuneQuest to Glorantha. And 3 years later, that's happening.
Yeah, it is. Well, it has. In fact, we launched RuneQuest G, as we call it. PDF has now been out for about a month and has been a great success. Definitely exceeded our expectations. It's also received, I guess you could say, critical acclaim as well, which is very gratifying.
I mean, it looks amazing and it's amazing to play. Now, the constituency of people who listen to my podcasts are gamers who used to play back in the day who are returning. Why should they reach out?
For people that have played RuneQuest before, this is a set of rules that are backwardly compatible with the releases that came out for RuneQuest 2, because the RQG rules are very much built on the chassis of RuneQuest 2. The reason why that was done is Greg Stafford, back in the day, was actually working on a new edition of RuneQuest, which was going to have a lot of the elements that we've put into RuneQuest G. When the Avalon Hill deal was made, and the decision was made, and Chaosium was part of that decision to turn RuneQuest into a generic rule set, a lot of those elements were taken out. And I'm talking about things like runic associations and passions and so on. So we've now put that all back in to the new edition of RuneQuest. It's essentially what RuneQuest would have become if, in an alternate history, the Avalon Hill deal hadn't have gone through. Greg then went off and put a lot of those elements into another role-playing game, which was called Pendragon. So we like to think that, in fact, this is a logical progression from what happened in RuneQuest 2. The great thing is, if you own those RuneQuest 2 materials, a lot of that is immediately playable with this new rule set as well. We think that this is a long and historic tradition going all the way back to what RuneQuest was in that second edition phase. We also have conversion notes for converting characters and NPCs from the second edition and the third edition to RuneQuest G, which is a very simple process.
And it does retain a lot of the great things that made RuneQuest 2 good, like the grit and the blow-by-blow action, augmented, to use one of the expressions, by actually involving the runes, isn't it, into the action.
Yeah, the game is called RuneQuest, the hint's in the name. So I think it's a really cool thing that the runes now become a central aspect of how your character interacts with the world. So player characters and NPCs all identify with certain runes, and you use your affinity or association with that runes affects how you use your magic, that affects how you interact with others and interact with the gods and the world. So you can be strong in certain runes and weak in others, and you can change those as play progresses. I think that's a really wonderful addition to the rules, and that was certainly something that Greg was working on with what was going to happen in the new version of the game. So it's great that that's now back, particularly as it's called RuneQuest. So there you go.
And I think another aspect of the rules that really work well, because as you say, it's built on the chassis of RuneQuest 2, but it addresses some of the issues with magic, doesn't it? Because Glorantha is a wonderfully magic setting, but it always felt a little mechanical in the previous edition of the rules. This really does free it up and allows a bit more access to rune magic, and it feels more fitting with the setting.
Well, I'm glad you think so, and I think that's a significant change between RuneQuest 2 and RuneQuest G, is that initiates, so this is like lower level characters that you would start out playing, they can use their divine magic, their rune magic from the gods in a reusable way. So you get that back at the end of the season or whatever. The other is we've changed it so that characters now have rune points. So you can use any of the rune magic that's available from your god. In the old rules, you actually had to decide which spell you sacrificed for, and then you could use that, and that was it. So a case in point being, in RuneQuest 2 and 3, there is an Orlanth rune magic spell or divine magic spell called Wind Words, which is, in many respects, an amazingly useless piece of divine magic to sacrifice for, if that's the only choice you have. It enables you to send a message on the wind to somebody downwind. And in Strangers in Prax, in the scenario I wrote for that, I created a situation where finally, at last, there was a use for that spell. And it was very frustrating. In the editing process, Ken decided, that spell is so useless, we're not going to do that. And he changed it from the characters use wind words to send a secret message to, I think, using Mind Link or something like that. I was very disappointed that was taken out. In the new RuneQuest G, you absolutely could use wind words because you don't have to sacrifice for it as your choice of a spell, and then you don't get to use any others. So you have the full suite of magic available. And I think that just brings a whole lot more interesting narrative choices to how you interact with the world and do things.
I've run the Quick Start adventure several times now. Each time the players have found an inventive way of using the magic during the game, and that's surprised me every time. So that's a really good addition to the game, I think.
It's definitely one of the major changes that are made between the editions, but I think it's a wonderful change. Only makes play more imaginative and deep and exciting. Of course, one thing that everyone has to remember is, and this also goes way back to the origins of the game, if the player characters get to do this, so do the non-player characters and monsters.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And Greg Stafford said way back in 1978, if the adventurers are slaughtered or run screaming, don't forget the monsters get experience rolls too.
Yes.
That I think was a very revolutionary thing to write in 1978, when standard sort of adventuring was, a party of adventurers would go into a dungeon which would have rooms full of random monsters that you would basically kill and take their loot and move on. Whereas I think even the RuneQuest dungeons, as they were written in those days, really had a logical reason for the denizens of a dungeon to be where they are and what they're doing. And again, as Greg says, if you don't succeed, they might get better too. And I think that's trying to say everybody in this world is a real person. They're not just a plot device. This came about, if you saw, we bought out something called the Old School RuneQuest pack, and we found an adventure that was written by Greg in 1978 that was sitting in the files called The Sea Cave. Have you seen that one, Dirk?
I have seen that, and I've actually run that a couple of times too.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
Well, you would know then that that kind of is a dungeon.
Yeah.
In that the player characters go inside some caves by the sea. But I think that all of the denizens there have a reason for being there.
Yes.
And an ecology and a life of their own.
And there's conflict within their coexistence depending on how they're encountered. It could shift how that encounter unfolds depending when it happens, because it's a living, breathing place. And
the other cool thing I think about it is there's no warm-up fights in RuneQuest. There's no mook fights. Every fight could be your last, and I love the sense of that. And also, you could encounter the big bad at the very beginning, and sometimes the best thing to do is run away or hide or work out another way of solving the problem. I like, for example, in the Broken Tower scenario for RQG, you can actually play that entire final culmination of that adventure. You don't have to get involved in combat in that, but you can still satisfactorily resolve it in an exciting way.
Yeah, you can just take the cows and run.
You could. I like the fact that when we were play testing that some of the players that I play tested with said, this has got a bit of a Call of Cthulhu vibe.
It definitely has, yeah, it definitely has.
And one of the solutions actually to that scenario is to become a cultist at the end.
Yeah.
I also like the fact that scenario, the big bad in that isn't evil. It's just different. It's got its own perspective. Shades of grey in terms of good, evil, and morality in RuneQuest and Glorantha, which are interesting things to explore as well. Same thing came out with the Lunar Coders, who serve the Lunar Empire but are not in themselves evil.
So you've got us old grognards you need to appeal to, as you say. You've got the Glorantha enthusiasts who will hopefully buy the product anyway, and we mentioned that other group of people that you need to reach out to, so new players to Glorantha and RuneQuest. So what are your strategies for dealing with that?
Well, there's one big group of people out there, a surprisingly big group, that know about Glorantha and don't necessarily know anything about it as a role-playing game setting, and that's people that have played the King of Dragon Pass mobile game. Yeah. So King of Dragon Pass is a mobile game that amazingly was first launched in 1999 as a point-and-click computer game, and came and was relaunched a few years ago as a mobile game to be played on iPads and phones and so on, and has been phenomenally successful. So incredibly, there are probably more, particularly younger people today, that know about Glorantha as a setting from playing King of Dragon Pass than playing it as a role-playing game. That's definitely an audience that we want to reach out to. There's also a sequel to King of Dragon Pass which is going to be launched called 6 Ages, and that's also going to draw people into Glorantha and knowing about the world. So my kids, for example, my eldest boy actually was one of the playtesters for 6 Ages and rused the fact that he was the second person to finish playing the game to its conclusion, because he stopped playing for about 10 days, because I think he had exams, and then came on and finished the game in about 2 hours and discovered that someone else, one of the other playtesters, had finished it about a day earlier. So he was very disappointed he was the second. But he and his brother had actually played King of Dragon Pass and knew all about the gods and hero quests and things like that from playing it on their iPads before they'd actually played RuneQuest. And David Dunham, the creator of King of Dragon Pass, was quite surprised that I said my 8-year-old, as he was at the time, was actually playing King of Dragon Pass and enjoying it. It's quite intensive for reading, so it was very, very good for him to do that. And, of course, it's very engaging as well. So we feel that that is a very, very effective vector for getting people then to try the role-playing game experience. What we also want to do is we need to reach out to other role-playing game fans who are playing other role-playing games and tell them to try RuneQuest as a different experience. And I think the key ways that we do that is we point out some of the fundamental differences, I guess you could say, between playing a D20 type game and playing a D100 game like RuneQuest. And I think some of those differences are that RuneQuest doesn't have levels, doesn't have alignments, doesn't have character classes. The combat is visceral, exciting, and deadly. Player characters' destinies are very much in the hands of the players. You can shape your characters as you take them forward in their own way. And these are interesting differences between that and how a lot of D20 games work. So these are good things to point out. I would rather point out the cool features of RuneQuest rather than be, dissing the features of other games, though.
Is it right, Mob, that you're credited with coming up with the idea of maximum game fun?
I won't say that I'm necessarily credited. I might say I helped popularise that that term. Maximum game fun is the sense that, in any situation when you're playing the game, you want it to be an enjoyable experience for people. So factor that into anything that happens in the narrative experience. If you need to tweak the game to do so, then by all means do so. I think if you tie that, MGF, as we call it, with your Glorantha may vary, or later on actually Greg went further than that and said your Glorantha will vary. If you put those two factors in, I think you can make it a enjoyable experience for everybody. And we actively endorse both those principles. If you want to change your Glorantha that you roleplay in all sorts of ways, absolutely fine. If you want to house rule the RuneQuest rules in your own way, great. We have no problem with that at all. So we're going to have, I guess you could say, a canon of how we are portraying Glorantha and the timeline and things like that in our products that need to be consistent. But if you want to take that and do different things with it, we have no problems with that at all. Go for your life.
I think what you were saying about Sun County, sometimes it's good to run your adventures on the fringes of the stuff that's happening, and so that you've got more freedom. So if you're a new player to Glorantha, it's good to be on the edges, isn't it? To set adventures away in places where you can feel comfortable with before you engage with some of the meatier parts of the history and the mythology.
Sure, and also if you have a player character that comes from the fringes, they can ask all sorts of naive questions because they don't know. And there's nothing wrong with that. So, but if you want to have a character that's in the thick of it and you want to change the timeline, the chronology, you want to bring in some sort of other real-world historical analogies, as I said, we don't care. Do what you want with the setting. Greg was very, very clear from the very beginning with your Glorantha may vary, and as I said, he actually took that further and said your Glorantha will vary.
Yeah.
And we are perfectly fine with people doing that because we want people to have fun. Because if we're not having fun doing this, what's the point of doing it?
And the new rule book looks superb. I've looked through the PDF, and when this is released in August,
we've released RuneQuest G already in PDF, and it's available from either Chaosium or Drive-Thru RPG. If you buy it from chaosium.com, we have an interesting model where if you buy the PDF from us, we will get, when the physical book is out, we will give you a coupon which gives you the full price of the PDF off the physical book. And we'll start doing the release of the books, particularly to people who bought the PDFs in August. So we use a model at Chaosium where we print our books in China, and then they are sent from Hong Kong to our warehouses. And we've got warehouses in the United States, the UK, and Australia. So we distribute from those 3 locations.
So what are the plans for the next releases?
The next release we are going to do is the Bestiary, which is a collection of all the creatures and player character races and so on that you can meet. I think there's over 200. After that, we're going to be bringing out a GM pack, which is going to have a GM screen and some more adventures in it, in a similar sort of approach. We've also got in the works a second RuneQuest Quick Start, which again has more adventures to play in. I know that Jeff is in the middle at the moment of updating a classic adventure from the original RuneQuest. Actually, it's from the original Apple Lane supplement. It's the Rainbow Mounds.
Oh, really? Brilliant.
As updating that for RQG, and that we're going to have available as a free download from our website as well. We are very, very conscious that one of the reasons why RuneQuest 3 did not succeed as a vehicle for Glorantha is Sun County was brought out in 1991. So that was 8 years after the release of RuneQuest 3. They finally released some new scenario material for it. People have been waiting 8 years for something new to play. We are very, very conscious that that is not a good model. So we want to have lots and lots of new material to play from the get-go. The other thing that we have announced, and this is also going to be coming out very soon, is the return of the House magazine Wyrm's Footnotes. That is a magazine about Glorantha. Moon Design Publications did bring back issue 15 in 2012 after a mere 32-year hiatus. That all of a sudden is, 5 or 6 years ago. We've now re-bought it back. We're using a model where we're having guest editors put that together. I'm actually very much involved in the putting together of that. We have a new issue for that's going to come out in the next month or so as well, and that's going to be a vehicle for sharing Gloranthan material, not just written by us, but also written by fans and contributors. And it's also a great vehicle for people to show their writing chops for writing stuff for us going into the future. The other thing that we are thinking about doing, we don't have a definite date for this, but it's something we have very strongly in mind, is you may have seen for Call of Cthulhu, we have launched a community content resource on Drive-Thru RPG called the Miskatonic Repository. This is where people can write their own Call of Cthulhu material, put it up for sale on Drive-Thru RPG. You can set a price for it. You can make it a price. You can make it pay as you want. You can make it free. It's up to you. That is a community content resource. It's a bit like the DM's Guild for Dungeons and Dragons. We are looking at some point in the next year, setting up a similar resource for Glorantha. And that might cover all the different role-playing games that are set in that world, which is RuneQuest, HeroQuest, Glorantha, and 13th Age.
See, I think that'd be a really good resource because for new games masters and for all games masters, one of the challenges of running RuneQuest is having a stock of non-play characters available to use. Then that's a place where people can put them, isn't it? Some Reddit fan-made foes or fan-made fangs.
Yeah, and scenarios as well, and new cult, whatever. And that would also be a non-canonical resource. You can just MGF, and your Glorantha will vary as that as much as you like. We happily endorse that. So from that, we might take some of that material and then turn that into official releases, or talk to people who write there and say, hey, we love your stuff. Would you like to do X, Y, or Z with us? So that's in the planning. Look, we've got to get RQG out ourselves first before we move on to that next level. But I've been really happy with the way the Miskatonic repository is going, and so we can definitely see that as a possibility for RuneQuest or Glorantha as well.
And I can't let you go without asking one thing, because a lot of my listeners have asked me to ask this question. Is there going to be a return of the Tales of Mythic Adventure podcast?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you know what? I loved doing that, and so did Jeff. As you know, we now are part of the management of Chaosium. We have so much going on. It was just getting really difficult to find the time to put that together. However, we do appreciate and understand that is a really effective way for reaching people that love the stuff we're doing and people who are curious. So one of the things that I've been working on in recent months is trying to increase our digital presence. So we have a new member of our team called Jamie, and he's been helping us. You may have seen the videos that Jeff and Jason have done introducing RuneQuest.
Yeah.
Did some actual play with Encounter Roleplay for the new RQG. We've got a revivified YouTube page, and the number of subscribers have really kicked up on that. And so the next thing on our list, I'm actually going to be talking to Jamie about this later this week, is the return of our podcast, because we know that that's an important way to reach people. So a big part of that is just getting effective time management. It is something we're aware that people really enjoyed and would like to have back, and it's something we want to have back.
I think what people enjoyed about it was both of you displaying your enthusiasm for Glorantha and riffing ideas off each other of various places. I particularly enjoyed the one you did about Not Chet, for example.
Yeah, well, I think it's a great vehicle to riff for ideas and get feedback from others and so on. So we are very conscious that it would be a good thing to do again. One of the biggest challenges we have of doing things, and you'd appreciate this, Dirk, because I believe it's like about
nearly 2 o'clock. Yeah.
You could say the sun never sets on Chaosium. We could also say the sun never rises, because we are spread about the world. So one of our challenges is getting a time together when we are all awake and able to do this. Because I'm here in Melbourne, Australia. Jeff, as you know, is in Berlin, as is Jason, by the way. So that's why they could sit in that room together to talk about RuneQuest. Rick is in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Neil is in Seattle. Mike Mason is in the UK. So is Lynn Hardy. So we are very well spread around the world. So one of our challenges is getting our our heads all together in a convenient time zone. Poor Jeff, when he did the live play for Encounter Roleplay, that has to be on at a particular scheduled time for the eastern states of the US. So he was running that live play session from 2:30 in the morning his time to 5:30 in the morning, which I think was extremely heroic of him.
Yes, that's a real hero quest. Well,
yeah, absolutely.
The only thing about Tales of Mythic Adventure, I was never convinced that no ducks were harmed in the making of it.
No, the ducks were okay. We have had, I'm going to say, I've set up a new regular set of posts about reviews of note that we've got about different releases, and I put one up recently about the reviews that we've got for RuneQuest. All of the reviews have been wonderful, which is great. Except we did get a really weird comment on Drive Through RPG where someone complained about the very unpleasant pig sacrifice picture on a particular page. That was a really weird comment, particularly when you go to the actual picture and see that. You could very easily say the pig is just happily having a nice nap. There's no blood. There's nothing. So
yeah, and it's a wonderful picture as well. It's real. It's probably my favourite in the whole of the book. It's full of atmosphere and luminous.
But clearly, no pigs were harmed in the creation of that image. So people love the artwork. We are very, very lucky that we came across an artist called Andrei Fetisov. So he's the one that's done a lot of those large pictures that's in the book. He also did the cover art as well. And we discovered Andrei. I don't know, Dirk, if you've seen Call of Cthulhu, the colouring book.
I have, yes.
I worked with Andrei on that, and he actually came from being a Lovecraft fan. He's from Moscow in Russia. He really knew nothing about RuneQuest or Glorantha at all before we thought we'd see if he could do some pictures for us for Glorantha. He initially did some of the art that appears in 13th Age, and then, of course, we've brought him across to do the stuff for RQG, and I think his stuff is way up there with those glorious covers of the RuneQuest Renaissance done by Roger Raup, like the cover of Sun County and River of Cradles and Shadows on the Borderlands and so on. I love the rich details. I love the fact that you can look at a lot of those pictures and place yourself as a player character in those situations. I think that's the most powerful and evocative for me.
Absolutely. And if anything else, I want to enthuse people to start playing RuneQuest Glorantha, imagining yourself as a player character in Glorantha. And now's your chance to do that.
Yeah, I think this is a wonderful time to be a role-playing gamer of pretty much anything. It's just so big, but RuneQuest is back, and I think it's bigger and better than ever before. And we want as many people to engage with it as they can, and we've got lots of ways you can do it too. Well,
thank you very much, Mob. It's been great having you, and thanks for spending the time with us.
Oh, well, thanks for staying up so late to talk to me as well.
Thank you.
Just BLYTHY ROLLS!
Welcome to the Room of Role-Playing Rambling, where I'm joined by our resident rules lawyer, Judge Blythy. Hello, Blythy.
Hello, Dirk.
Now, this time you've left your legal syrup at your ancestral home in Little Wigan. Describe what your civvies, Judge Blythy. What do you wear? What do you wear when you're casual?
I'm never casual. The tweed suit comes out.
So this time you're not ruling, you're rolling.
I like what you've done there.
Yeah, because we're going to do two sections for this part of the episode. And first of all, we're going to answer a burning question from our listeners. And then in the second bit, we're going to roll your first ever RuneQuest Glorantha character. Since beginning this podcast 3 years ago, this very month, there's a question that keeps cropping up again and again from our listeners, people who contact me. And do you know what that question is?
Go on. It's not what Judge Blythy wear when he's casual, is it? Because you've just answered that.
No, it's not that one. I think that's number 5.
Number 5?
Yeah.
Okay.
Number 1 is, why do you speak so slowly? So number 2 is, where do I start with Glorantha? And it is a pressing question, isn't it? Because even back in the day, I think we've talked about previously, and particularly Daily Dwarf has mentioned that kind of overwhelming feeling that you had to do Glorantha right.
It's a kind of an eternal RPG problem, isn't it? Because it's a funny one, isn't it? Because on the one hand, I would say it's not that difficult to get into Glorantha. But I think once you're in there, it sort of overwhelms you a bit. I think that's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not difficult to set up a game of role-playing in Pavis or Sartar or whatever, and, be some Sartar rebels against the evil Lunar Empire, or be some Stormbull cultists who go down a chaos nest and kill things. I mean, all that's pretty easy and straightforward and a lot of fun. And it's the problem we had when we started, wasn't it? That we started playing RuneQuest and we started playing in Glorantha and had a lot of fun. But gradually, it does a kind of strange pincer movement on you, doesn't it? And before you know it, you're kind of scratching your head about, I don't know, we're going to meet some Eldrami now or some Mustali, or what did the Dragon Newts do? What's all that? I want to bring some Dragon Newts into it, but I'm not sure what they do or what they're there for.
You see, I don't think it's so much the races. I think it's
not necessarily races, but that's an example, isn't it? There's cultures and there's a depth. So monsters in Glorantha. So in D&D, you'd have lizard men, and they're pretty straightforward. They're not particularly complicated. But in Glorantha, Dragon Newts are complicated in that there'll be a background somewhere, won't there? There'll be some stuff written somewhere about all the ins and outs of, the Dragon Newt's backside or something like that. So you have to kind of feel like you have to know it, and that's the root of the problem.
Yeah, I think in and out of a Dragon Newt's backside was by Mongoose, so it's not canon. But
yeah, well, that's the problem, isn't it? Yeah.
You see, I think that is part of the problem. So the idea of the ecology of the monsters, but I think it's just that there's so many names and so many contradictory stories, and just so much stuff that's been written over the years that you feel that you need to know it all. I think I've used this anecdote before, but I went to a convention, and around the table, the games master asked, "What's your familiarity with Glorantha?" And nobody dared admit that they knew anything about it. So, there was like this tentative thing where people were wanting to put their hands up to, I know a little bit. And I knew that people around there, totally familiar with it. But there's this feeling that you need to be a scholar to really appreciate it. And I am concerned about that when it comes to the new game, because I've encountered people who've already made their minds up about Glorantha and that it's not for them, and I don't want them to miss the opportunity of playing this game and rediscovering Glorantha, or discovering it for the first time. Because when we first started playing, what you had to do, there was very little in the original rulebook, wasn't it, about Glorantha. You had to work it out from the example play in Rurik. You had to work it out from the monsters and the sample cult that they gave you. And then that's all you had, really. And you had to use your imagination and playing together to expand from that.
Yeah, and you come back to that thing, don't you, about any role-playing setting. All settings have this problem, don't they? The problem with Glorantha is because it's so detailed and there's such a kind of history behind it, it becomes intimidating to play it your way, which you can, because it is made up. Yeah. It is made up, and when you're playing in Glorantha, 9 times out of 10, it's just you and your friends around the kitchen table doing stuff in an imaginary world. So you are allowed to do what you want. But you're right, it does feel, it's a strange kind of itch that you can't scratch sort of thing with Glorantha. I mean, it's a different game, but I recently bought HeroQuest Glorantha. Now, I think HeroQuest has a really neat summary of Glorantha within it. It's quite a neat summary. And I thought to myself, this is really good, this. You could buy this and, it's worth buying even if you're not going to play HeroQuest, because it gives you an affordable, accessible gateway into Glorantha. But then I sat there and I thought, there's that big guide to Glorantha, isn't there? And there's the big 2-volume thing that's about £100. Maybe I need that. Because that'll have things in it that I don't know that aren't in this. And it does start to kind of go round. But it is a bad way to think about it, because, like you say, you can just wade into it and do your own thing by and large. Because it is a game. It's not like, I don't know. You're not altering the real world, are you?
No. So in answer to this burning question that we keep getting, how do you get started? I've got 3 tips to begin with. So if you pick up this great rulebook, so let's get that out of the way first, because I am a RuneQuest zealot. I'm not a Glorantha zealot. I'm a RuneQuest zealot.
There's a difference.
There's a difference, but I think the two things go hand in hand. Of course, you can't have RuneQuest without Glorantha. Of course you can't. But now you've got these different flavours. You mentioned HeroQuest, and that can do scaled, expansive ideas and concepts and story. And you can do some great things with HeroQuest. There's the 13th age in Glorantha, which is a lot simpler. So if you're completely new to it, maybe that's a good way to start, because it's F20, isn't it? It's using D&D rules. And it is a bit more straightforward. I'm just going to think of this scene. So this scene where your face is in the mud, you've got a spear point in your shoulder. There's an ogre standing above you, and you send a crackle of energy into its head before pulling out the spear and shoving it into his groin. That's RuneQuest. That's what it's about. It's about those moments, those little moments. And you don't need the grand narratives that are behind it to just enjoy those moments. Danger and sense of jeopardy, because one day you might be riding through the town as a rune lord, the next day you might get impaled on a spear through an unlucky roll, and that's and that to me is why I'm a RuneQuest zealot.
Just to clarify as well, the spear in the shoulder, it is the left shoulder, isn't it?
It is the left shoulder, of course it is.
Left arm. Left leg and left arm. They will always get hit.
Yeah. Those moments, you against the world as an individual in the world. That's why it works well with Call of Cthulhu, because the bones of it are in RuneQuest, aren't they?
Mm. Yeah. But I think you're right. Of all the games we've played, it's the one that if you want to simulate combat, it probably does it the best, I think.
Yeah.
There are games that try and simulate combat more, but there's a tipping point, isn't there, with simulationist games that it tips into becoming unplayable. And I think we've always said this, haven't we? That RuneQuest strikes the balance between playability and realism. Yeah. So it does feel like a real fight. You have hit locations. There are consequences. So if you are hitting the left leg, you fall over. You're on the floor. Those kind of realistic things going on there. But at the same time, it is playable. You can play it. Yeah. It does have its problems. The scalability thing can be a problem. As you said, HeroQuest does that better. So you can end up with lots of NPCs, lots of player characters, lots of dice rolls. It can get a little bit cumbersome. But again, I think the reason we've always enjoyed it is because back in the day, we never had many players. And it works really well for people who don't have a lot of players, I think, because combat can be quite a lengthy business, can't it?
Yeah.
And that's quite good when you've got one or two or three, just 2 or 3 players, because it makes more of an event of it.
Okay.
I think it becomes a bit cumbersome when you've got lots and lots of players.
Okay, these are my top 3 tips for people who want to get into Glorantha and start playing with RuneQuest role-playing in Glorantha. I'm going to run them past you now, Blythy, and then I'm going to go in some detail. Are you ready? First off, start playing as soon as possible. Do not delay. Pick up the rulebook and start playing. Number 2, discover the world together. And number 3, avoid the forums. Okay? So
yes.
Yeah, okay. So let's go through each of one of those. So start playing the game as soon as possible. Because I think that's what struck me with people who have picked up the source book or the guide to Glorantha. There is actually enough in this rule book, this role-playing in Glorantha. The gazetteer for Glorantha is fantastic, and the maps are the best I've seen in this new edition. So you don't need anything else. So just get playing.
That comes back to my argument, doesn't it? That don't lose sight of the fact that it is just you and your friends playing a role-playing game.
Exactly.
And having fun together, using your imagination. Sounds a bit of an obvious thing to say, but I sometimes think people who are intimidated by Glorantha kind of forget that. In the same way that it works both ways, doesn't it? The people who, and I know you're going to come on to this, but the people who perhaps enjoy intimidating people with their knowledge of Glorantha have lost sight of the fact that it's supposed to be fun and it's a role-playing game for people to enjoy. In the same way that people who are scared of or are intimidated by Glorantha sometimes lose sight of that. It is a game to be played. If you do something in a game of RuneQuest and Glorantha, I know the lunar soldiers are wearing the wrong colour cloaks or something. Greg Stafford's not going to knock on your door, come and have a word with you, is he?
Yeah.
The Glorantha police aren't waiting outside the Glorantha detector van with the radar on top.
We're gonna start rolling a character in the second part of this, and in this game, in this new edition, they do front load all the mythology right at the beginning. So my next tip as part of starting playing as soon as possible is use the pre-gens. So they provide some pre-generated characters as part of it. You can also get the same pre-generated characters as part of the quick start that's available free on the Chaosium website. Just use them because creating characters, we'll come to see later, is fun, but it's going to delay you because there'll be avenues of inquiry whilst you're building up the background to your character that you'll want to explore. So to avoid that, use the pre-gens for your first games.
Well, yeah, I think you're right there, because the character creation, I've had a look at it, and it is a lot of fun. It looks like it's a lot of fun. It's kind of a lot of fun if you know a bit about Glorantha. So yeah, I think creating a character before you start playing might be a little off-putting. Like you say, it might take you down certain avenues that you might not be particularly helpful. So yeah, start playing with the pre-gen. Yeah. And then create a character when you're a bit more familiar with it.
Yeah. And then the next thing is just picking up what you're saying, that don't make it too complicated. So the bestiaries come out, and as I said earlier, our first encounters with Glorantha was just enjoying the exotic and weirdness of some of the races that are in there and some of the monsters. So start with that. Start with just like, I've got the bestiary here, so let's have a look what we've got. So you could scroll down here. So yeah, your first adventure could be returning a dragonborn clanth to a dragon colony. Yeah, in barter for something in return. That's just plucked from the pages of the bestiary, because the bestiary is really good. It's got really good consistent artwork, but it's also got little bits of flavour to each of the ecology of things. So that's another one.
Well, like you said, that's the thing, isn't it? A lot of the background, the ecology and the cultural stuff is just window dressing. At the end of the day, you're doing stuff that you do in all fantasy role-playing games, aren't you? Yeah,
but I think
people doing this, doing that. It's all. I don't want to say it's standard stuff. That's a bit. That sounds a bit negative to say it's standard stuff. But what I mean is, as you said, you can go and fight some monsters, and negotiate with some trolls or some dragon newts or something like that, and have a lot of fun without worrying too much about all the detailed stuff. And even when you've been playing in Glorantha for a long time. I mean, we did, didn't we? We back in the day we played in Glorantha all the time, and you bought all the supplements, troll pack, and all the other stuff. But a lot of our games were still fighting stuff, and it doesn't really matter, does it? All the other stuff.
I've got another one here. So one of the races, they were just really referred to as dwarves back in the day, but the Mustali and the drawings of the Mustali in the new book are really good, because apart from the cover makes them look like Tolkien-esque, but inside they have the weirdness and some of the creations that they have, because they're a bit more a bit of a strange race that coexists with the rest of the people on Glorantha. So it'd be good to encounter one of those just to give your players a sense of the weirdness. So you could have one that's lost above ground and they have to return to the conclave underground, and it's in the middle of a copse occupied by the Aldramai, the elves. Or you can just, as you say, just head to the cliffs and steal some scorpion men eggs. They...
Yeah, you can, yeah. You can do stuff like that. You'll have a good time.
You'll have a good time. So that's my first tip summed up. Just get playing.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. Because the other thing, as I said earlier, the combat in RuneQuest. So you don't need to set up something too complicated because combat can be quite lengthy and quite eventful as well.
Yeah.
So combat can be an event in itself, isn't it? Because there's all sorts of things that can happen. Hit locations, fumbles, magic, all those things that can make a simple adventure quite eventful. So you don't have to worry too much initially about it being overly complicated, because the system will provide colour and events, I think.
So my next tip was discover the world together, and what I mean by that is, I think like Mob said in the last part of the episode, if you stick like some county, something on the edges of Glorantha, or edge of Dragon Pass, or in some place, so just look at the map and just put it somewhere out of the way. You can just do stuff without worrying about whether you're a lost badger tribe of the foothills are an acceptable things.
Badger tribe? Good God! Not the giant badgers. They're not introduced them. The new one. I won't have it.
They're not in there, but I'll put badgers in because my Glorantha will vary. But they do, don't they? No, you're right. That is another thing to do, and we always used to do things like that. There's plenty of places in Glorantha that you can just stick an adventure. Yeah,
it's not. I mean, it's detailed, but it's not that detailed. There's always places. But I think you're right in the sense that that's some people's inclination, isn't it? We're playing in Glorantha, so let's set it in Pavis. Let's set it here, let's set it in Boldholm, let's set it wherever, and pick places that are quite detailed. And in a way, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot, aren't you? Because you're picking somewhere that's got a lot of background and immediately intimidating. Whereas if you pick somewhere in some backwater, you kind of do what you want, really.
And it just means that you can avoid doing that dump of information about the town or the city where the location is. The other thing, the way that Griffin Mountain worked was it's just a hex crawl, isn't it? You're just on a part of Joe Myth's caravan is one of the routes through it. You're part of a caravan. You're just wandering from place to place, discovering it in a sense.
Yeah.
Another good tip is to have one of the characters, a Lankar Mai scribe or an explorer scout. So you're giving them an excuse to look up things. So as you're discovering places, it's a good way for the players actually to just find out things rather than you having to say everything that's happening.
Yeah.
Discover the world together. I think that's it. That's the important thing. And it'll grow by osmosis. As we'll go on to look at the character creation, it will develop. You will get to learn more about it. Right, the third one, and this is a bit of a contentious one, and it doesn't mean to sound impolite. There is a strong fandom around Glorantha, and as we found out last time from Mob, it's the fans that really kept it going. So kept Glorantha going, and it's the reason why we've managed to get this new edition, because they kept the spirit and idea of it together, and we've a lot to be grateful for. And a lot of those fans now occupy some of the forums that you might go on in social media. And I would normally say, as a game, if there's anything into it, if you want to find out want to find out how your dishwasher works, it's sensible to go on online, isn't it? Onto a support forum and say, I want to put a pump in. How do I do it? The difficulty with Glorantha and the fandom is that they're so steeped in the mythology and all the different contradictions and all the different ethnographic details that it can knock you a bit sideways. And I know that it did with me when I got back into RuneQuest a few years ago. They don't mean to discourage you, but you kind of think, oh no, I just do not know this. I don't feel confident enough about Glorantha because of the level of detail that they've provided.
But you also get that thing as well with that sort of approach to it, where it makes you wonder whether it stops becoming a setting for a role-playing game. Because I think there is a distinction, in my mind, there is a distinction between a fantasy world, a fictional fantasy world, and a setting for a role-playing game. And I think Glorantha is a good example of where sometimes it's tipped into being a fictional fantasy world for some people rather than a role-playing setting. Because most of the great, it's a bit like Gareth Ryder Hanron said in a previous interview, that fuzziness. I think you need a bit of fuzziness in a role-playing setting so that people can feel that they have the elbow room to do their own thing. The problem is, if that setting becomes increasingly like a very, very detailed fictional fantasy world, it becomes intimidating. It's a bit like the problem we always had with Middle-earth role-playing, wasn't it? That because Middle-earth is this literary setting with lots and lots of detail, when we were role-playing in it, we always thought, oh God, I can't do anything. Whereas what we liked about Stormbringer was that the Young Kingdoms, it's a bit vague and fuzzy. In the novel, it's not documented anywhere, is it?
No.
It's just the vague stuff that you can put what you want in it. And I think that's the thing with Glorantha. It's like there is with some of the stuff on the forums. It's like there's been a tipping point where it's become a fictional world rather than a setting for a role-playing game. Because I think they are different things and they function in very different ways.
Well, I think it's because Glorantha exists beyond RuneQuest now, doesn't it? We've mentioned the other games,
exactly, yeah.
And there's other activity around it, isn't there? There's other fan activity around it, so that people are inventing songs and that kind of thing. It's a creative world building exercise, and
that's what I mean. Yeah, but I do think that can be a problem when you and what you've got to learn to do is rein it back from that as a games master and as players round your kitchen table on a Friday night or whenever you're playing it. You've got to be able to rein it back from that fictional world building thing in order for it to give you a bit of maneuverability and a bit of playability. I do think there's like a sliding scale. There is a point where it becomes unplayable if you go so far into it, have so much detail that you feel you can't do anything.
Yeah, and I think there was a point, as I mentioned, that I put something on. I think it was a G plus group, and people were starting talking about Ezroilian hair dressing. So how women would have their hair in particular ways, or something like that, or something to do with the longhouses and how they were arranged in different cultures. I suppose what I'm saying in these early sessions when you first start, what you need to be bothered about is being in that moment with plunging the spear into the ogre's chest or into the groin of whichever hit location you roll, rather than how people have their hair in a particular style.
I agree, and that's my point. I think once people are writing detailed things about how people have their hair and how buildings are laid out in particular cultures, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that, because that in itself is an imaginative exercise, and there's nothing wrong with it as such. But for a setting for a role-playing game, you've gone too far.
Your Glorantha will vary. I think that hit home after this bad experience when on Twitter the people who do the King of Dragon Pass said, well, we've got this game that's very immersive, uses all the stories of Dragon Pass, but we don't have Sartar. And right, you realise actually they've taken that out of their version of the story, and that is the most popular version of it out there at this time. And the other thing is this idea of having as much fun with it as you can. Go with it.
And if anyone criticises your character's hairdo because it's not accurate, don't listen to them. Take it to a different hairdresser.
There will be time when you can do that, when you feel more confident with it. But, if you want to start in Glorantha, watch The Golden Voyage of Sinbad, hand out some pre-gens, pick an encounter, come back to a non-specific base, discover Glorantha together, and Bob's your auntie's living lover. There you go.
As well, I would add to that, don't feel that you ever have to know about those tiny, tiny, tiny details, like hairdos, building layouts, basket weaving, this, that, and the other. Don't feel that, because that's part of it, isn't it? Don't feel that you ever really have to know about those things. So it's not a case of getting into the game and at some point you will learn about all these other things. If you don't, it don't matter. It doesn't matter, does it? No. You don't have to. You can find your own level with it.
We're going to come back and roll character, and we'll talk a little bit about that, because I do think there's a place for some of the different mythologies, but we'll come back to that in a moment. So we're just going to break away for a moment. We're going to listen to some actual play. It's a sample from The Broken Tower, which I did with Baz, Gaz, and Matt from the Smart Party podcast, and this is just a taster. If you want to listen to the full one, if you go over to the podcast, you'll find it. But here's a sample play. Hope you enjoy it.
Sounded like Johnny Walker then.
Did I?
I hope you enjoy it.
I hope you enjoy it.
Whistling Bob Harris or something. The Rogue Grey Whistle Test.
Diana Jones award-winning actual play.
So the three of you have been travelling across country, and you've reached this road, still following the tracks of the cattle that have been stolen. But the tracks are starting to disappear because the rain is lashing down, drenching you as you're travelling. And it's an ancient road, and you can see the signs of prior habitation. There are ruins at the side. And you come to notice that at the side of the roads, there seems to be stone menhirs that are broken. And there's one ahead that is the first that you've seen that seems to be fully formed.
How big are these things?
They come to waist height.
And what form does the unbroken one look, or is it too far away in the rain?
You'll need to approach it.
Well, I'm going to use my warrior's caution. And while these two have been riding in the lap of luxury upon their beasts, I've been using my Mark 1 sandals to make progress. So I'm going to shuffle a little further forward and just give a bit of a gaze about, because I'm aware of these unkempt barbarians of these parts and suspect there might be some kind of ambush or somebody watching us. So I just want to have a scan about and see if I can see any heathens in the undergrowth who are waiting us.
Well, roll scan.
And manually roll. This is exciting.
Yeah.
Hey, real dice.
Yeah.
Not one. Who knew?
Yeah, get a critical again. 31 of a scan of 65, so I'll succeed.
You look ahead, and through the rain and the bluster, you notice eyes peering at you from above one of the ruined walls. It seems dark-skinned. These eyes seem to duck down and disappear and run north.
I'll flick my short spear in the direction to point at this figure and trust that my warrior-like companions understand what I mean, as we've probably travelled together before sometimes. There's people ahead, but they seem scared as well. They might be of puissant warriors such as us.
It's notable, this, because you've not seen anyone for days.
All right, I'll stand up in the stirrups astride my bison, which is probably starting to stink in this rain by now, but that's all right. I think I quite like it. And I'll bellow through the rain a greeting in the language of the region. Say, hold fast. We're friends. We mean you no harm. Hold fast.
Whoever it is seems to dart onto the road, still running away from you, pell-mell.
Human, is it? Or what do they look like?
Human in scraps of clothing, but seems to be almost caked in mud, generally unkempt.
All right, certainly
And
not
he seems to
great
duck
dog.
away. Difficult to tell from this point. What you are aware of as well, by the side of this menhir here, is a satchel that's been abandoned.
Right.
Well, I'll look at the Harmast on his lean-limbed zebra and suggest if you wish to chase down that fool, I'm no doubt you could catch it. But
well, I don't know if rushing in is always the wisest course of action. Perhaps he will stop running after a while. I think it's probably best just to sit, assess the situation, and make sure we understand all the variables.
Oh, I see. Like a good noble, you wish to lead from the rear. I was used to that in New Peloria. Many of us died while you poshed off, sat at the back giving orders. But don't worry, you be cautious. I'll lead the way. I'm used to it. I bear the scars enough.
Wonderful, an excellent idea, and I shall maintain a high level view of the situation.
Yeah, do let us know of any strategical shifts. And I'll start trudging through the mud towards this satchel and men here.
You go for it, Luna. Take care that the lone tramp or the abandoned satchel doesn't ambush you.
Yeah, it's like a thick-bodied woman with a faceless head, wreathed in bands, and it looks like they've been positioned to stand watching over the road. And you become aware when you get nearer to it, Voster, that it seems to have like an ochre, sulphurous smoke emitting from it.
Oh.
Well, I'll take note of the earth runes carved near the feet, and that is one close to me as well. I'll say a prayer to the lunar equivalent of an elder, whatever the Seven Mothers version of an earth or fertility goddess is, and then approach a bit closer. I said my blessing, trusting that the Seven Mothers will protect me.
Okay, that sounds like a good call on your rune. So if you roll against the earth rune, you've got that.
I succeed, the 28.
Okay, so whatever happens, you're going to have plus 20.
Lovely.
So this sulphurous smoke seems to form into a woman wrapped in bandages. And it steps forward and clutches your face.
What have you found, Vorstar? Something interesting?
Mother, I utter.
Oh, mother. Oh, wonderful.
Speak to me, mother.
It seems to be disembodied, this shape, and it starts to press her thumbs into your eyes and is trying to enter your head.
Well, I am disinclined to allow this to happen. I wish to retreat from the spirit and force it out my head.
Harmast and Vasana, you can see this shape emerging. It's got diaphanous ribbons and bandages wrapped around this huge shape, pushing herself into Voster's head. It's trying to engage in a combat with you.
Do I recognise this spirit at all? I've got cult law Isaris being an initiate. Am I able to identify it as some kind of cult spirit, or
you can try and roll against that?
All right, I'm going to get a 52 out of 30, so I don't think that's going to be terribly successful.
I'm going to slam my helmet on my head, leap from the back of my bison, and run screaming towards this bandaged monstrosity with a broadsword that held aloft.
Okay, that sounds like good action. So you can actually move forward, round, because this combat's going to take place at the end of the round. So your actions go first.
Nice.
You stride along and roll with your sword.
Okay, so 90% in broadsword, so I guess I just rolled against that, right? And 70 to hit.
Roll for damage.
Okie dokie. Oh, that's not great. There wasn't much strength behind that. That's 3 damage.
It's it's slippy.
Yeah.
So the sword passes through the abdomen of this strange creature. Can you roll your spirit combat, Vostar? I think it's 45, isn't it? But you get the additional 20 because of the prayer you made.
Indeed, and I get a roll of 17.
You might manage to fight it off, and it seems to disappear in a cloud. It didn't have great strength.
Solid bronze is always the answer. Luna, did it get in your head? Are you well? Can you speak, man? Talk to me.
In those brief moments, Foster, you saw images of an ancient time where the earth seemed to rise up and devour chaos and trolls, and striding over this was a big, thunderous calves and thighs of some monstrous woman bearing down on these creatures, and then you seem to snap out of it.
You always wake up at the wrong time.
Just BLYTHY ROLLS!
Welcome to the room of role-playing rambling, where we're just rolling a character. We've just done it, haven't we? We've come to the end of it. So the last bit, Blythe, is...
We've been up here for 6 months. Rolling character.
It has taken...
Like that.
It has taken a bit longer than I was anticipating.
Yeah, there's a delay on the release of this podcast, that's why.
It was good fun, though, wasn't it?
It's good fun. Rolling characters is good fun. Sometimes fall out of the habit of rolling characters, don't you? Because back in the day, we would kind of, it was done as a kind of group activity, wasn't it? Whereas now we just say, oh, roll a character, or we use pre-gens and that. You know what I mean? But it's kind of part of the game, really, that you forget, don't you? You forget that it's as much fun as playing, almost, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's a bit like I think Gaz from the Smart Party describes it as lonely fun. You know, when you're up in your garret and
Isn't it all?
Yeah, you're in a garret and creating something from tables and things. But yeah. It has taken slightly longer than anticipated. So what's the name that you've settled on? And
I've gone for Farnan, son of Durang, Kolimar tribal fella from Sartar.
Yeah, well, that's the default setting, isn't it? And
yes.
I think we've said, haven't we, earlier that you don't really need to get enmeshed into the rich background as a default setting. Around Dragon Pass and Sartar, with the different conflicting tribes and clans, it does make it more interesting when you get into that. And inevitably, in this game, you'll want to know something more about the gods of Glorantha and your character's relationship with them.
Yes, and I think it's fair to say as well, rolling the character does give you a lot of... It gives you a background and it gives you a taste of Glorantha, doesn't it? Because you build your character's family history, don't you? When one of the things that you do.
Yeah.
One of the things is quite time consuming, but it kind of pays off because it gives you a little insight into it.
Shall we just have a talk through Farnan then and how we went about creating him? So, as you say, first off, you have to choose your homeland, and you went for Dragon Pass.
Yes.
And there are advantages to choosing Dragon Pass because, part of the, and Mob mentions this, part of the good thing about Glorantha is the fact that it's not about good and evil, there's kind of a moral relativism, isn't there, depending on your association with things that are happening in the world, and that's what makes it rich and interesting. So picking a background like Sartar, where some of the conflicts are not very clear, are they? Some of the bad things that people are doing are actually for a greater good.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of sort of like conflicting tribes and conflicting loyalties and things, and wherever you're positioned, that informs what you think of the world, and I suppose what you think of as good and bad. I mean, there are bad things in Glorantha. There's chaos, isn't there?
Yeah.
Thanatar and Malia and horrible cults like that, that you've got, which is a bit more clean cut. But within the tribes and within the different
associations and things like
Yeah,
that.
you've got like petty kind of rivalries, haven't you, between tribes and things
Yeah.
like that. And what role in your family history does is position you within that world in terms of what you like and you don't like, and what's been done to you, what's been done to your family.
And to get a sense of this, it is a good idea, if you can, to have a game of King of Dragon Pass, because it'll give you an idea of those different tribes and the association between them. So you start with your favoured grandparent.
Yeah, it's a bit like, at first glance, you think of it, it's like Traveller, isn't it? You know, you're doing that kind of life path creation, aren't you? But
Yeah.
it's a bit deeper than that, isn't it? Because you start off with you pick a favoured grandparent, and I pick grandmother.
Yeah, your maternal grandmother.
Maternal grandmother, yeah. And you roll, don't you, for events in their life. So the most significant event I rolled was she was killed in the Bold Home campaign.
Yeah, well, she kind of kept her head down, didn't she, for a while?
She kept her head down, hoped to blow over. No, didn't. She got killed in Bold Home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She gave birth to your mother. And
it's quite crucial that she did that. Otherwise, it would have been a pretty short character creation process, wouldn't it? Yeah. And she fought. She fought in the Holy Country.
Yeah.
My maternal grandmother, gives birth to my mother, but then you pick a favoured parent, which is my father.
Yeah.
Who presumably is Jurang, as I am son of Jurang. And he had normal year, and then he fought in the Strawberry Rebellion, and then the following year he died, although you roll cause of death, and cause of death is unknown. He disappeared. He's presumed dead, isn't he? He's missing, presumed dead. He may not be dead.
He's going to turn up.
Of course he is. Any games master worth his salt.
Yeah.
And I even include you in that. Would make him turn up. I am your father. Yeah.
And then
it's good, isn't it? Because it gives you, just that thing, isn't it? It gives you a bit of flavour, a bit of background, which is quite good, I think. Quite interesting.
It's good. And then when it gets to you as an adventurer, so even before you know your characteristics or what kind of calibre you are as a person.
I think that's an important point, isn't it? This all takes place before you've rolled your 3d6 and you know your stats and everything. Yeah. It's
and what happens when it gets to the hero? So you're rolling the events. It escalates quite a bit, doesn't it? Because you add pluses to the tables, and the tables.
Yeah, once you get to your history, that's right. So you roll there's about 4 years that you roll before you start adventuring, because he witnessed. So, for example, he witnessed the dragon rise, and that fed into one of his passions, which is a fear of dragons.
Yeah.
So when you roll your history, are quite significant because they kind of mould your character and give you these things called passions, which are views of the world expressed as a percentage.
Yeah.
So, for example, let's have a look.
I think it's a way of expressing formative experiences have shaped who you are as a character.
Yes.
And they're your drives, aren't they? And I believe it's an idea that comes from Pendragon. That idea of, your heritage has informed your outlook in the world. Yeah. And the way that works mechanically is that you can draw on those passions to increase your chances of doing things when it's relevant.
You can use those in the game, can't you? So he's got, for example, one of his passions is love of his family, 60%. So if your family was being attacked or you were negotiating on behalf of your family, you can try and add 20% to a skill by rolling under the 60% passion that you've got. Can't you? That's what they work in game terms.
Yeah, and if you get a special against that argument using the passion, you can increase it by 50% because you come particularly inflamed with that passion.
Yes. So it's two. It kind of works in two ways, doesn't it? In one sense, it gives you a feel for what's important to your character. So just in pure role-playing terms, you've got a picture of what matters to them, but you've also got tacked on it a mechanic that influences the game itself and the dice rolls.
Yeah,
it's nice. I do like it. I think it's a really good addition to the system. Actually,
there's another dimension to it as well. Is that as a games master, you can have intrusions against your passion, so you can get challenged against your passion.
Yes.
So if you work in a way that contradicts one of your passions, so for example, your love of your family, your loyalty towards your family, if you start to contradict that as a games master, you can challenge it. You can say, well, I'm going to use this passion to intervene.
Yes. Yeah. And I know when we played the quick starter, my character had some passions, and they're a good idea. They do give you a sense of playing the role, which is always important, I think, and particularly in Glorantha, because again, it gives you a sense of how you fit into the world and what you think about the world that you're in.
Yeah,
and it's useful for that. Like you say, not like we said earlier, not wading in. It's not like you have to wade into it, but it's a good way of dipping your toe into it because it gives you some ideas to explore about why you feel the way you feel about certain things.
So the next stage is about your runic association. So this is your affinity towards the different forces and how the gods and their conflicts leak into the world and to you as a character, and how they have influence over you as a character. Now, personally, this is my favourite element because we've said on numerous occasions when we've tackled RuneQuest on numerous occasions, about how magic is fundamental to Glorantha and to RuneQuest, but in some ways it's never really worked effectively previously, and I do think that having these runic associations does give you a genuine feel for how they can have an influence over you as a character.
Yes, yeah, and they work a bit like passions, don't they? They work in a similar way, in that you end up with percentages next to certain runes that give you a sense of which runes are influencing you. So disorder, illusion, death, all those kind of things. You have associations with them to greater or lesser extents, which again. Gives you a sense of. I suppose it's like more or less kind of personality, isn't it? Really, that's what it's kind of doing. In very crude terms, it's a bit more than that. But if you want to be very crude about it and explain it to someone who didn't really know what the hell runic associations were, so you might have loyalty to your family, but the rune tells you how you approach that loyalty and how you would deal with that loyalty.
So there's essentially two principal types of rune, aren't there? There's the elemental rune, which is darkness, air, earth, water, moon, fire, and you choose which of those are your predominant ones. There's usually three that you choose.
There's three, and one depending where you come from. So because he's from Sartar, and the cult of Orlanth, the god of the wind and the air is quite prevalent, and that's kind of bumped up a bit, isn't it?
Yes.
It's kind of it's not preordained which runes you get, but it leads you in a particular direction to some extent.
And I suppose that's influenced by the homeland that you choose. So depending on your different background, that might be different. But it's the power runes that I think are very interesting because they're balanced against each other. So fertility and death, a total of 100% distributed between the two, and the two things are in conflict. Harmony and disorder, truth and delusion, man and beast, status and movement. They add those two runes add up to 100%, and depending on the choices you make will tip the balance. And what I like about it, like unlike some games where you make these kind of choices, you can have contradictory elements to your character. Because I find sometimes when you make these choices, you end up going down one track. So yes, he's a hot-headed character, therefore this will inform all the choices I make. But in some ways, by having all these different elements, you can have a very contradictory character. So on the one hand, somebody who is, in tune with the air, but also very balanced and believes in harmony.
That's it, isn't it? It's like the old problem with alignment, isn't it? Of it takes you down a particular road, and everyone ends up the same. Everyone who's chaotic good ends up like Robin Hood. That kind of thing, isn't it? Where it allows for a little more subtlety, doesn't it? I mean, I think what's good about it is you don't have to be subtle about it if you didn't want to be. So if you wanted to create a rather extreme character, you can do.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're right. It doesn't necessarily have to be like that. Whereas some systems do push you in a particular direction and make everyone a bit the same in some, in that respect. There's not much subtlety in it, but there is a degree of subtlety to it, which is quite nice.
Broadly, the rest of the character creation is much similar to what's in RuneQuest 2.
Yes. The game system and the stats and all that stuff. I mean, there weren't two nice differences, but the basic principles of it are exactly the same, aren't they?
Yeah.
You still got strike rank, and you've still got criticals, and you've still got all that, hit locations.
You roll the characteristics in the same way as you do back in the old system. Kind of encouraging you to make sure that you don't have a duff character by, suggesting you re-roll when it's very low.
Well, they have, haven't they? They've thrown out what I like to call the Rurik principle, haven't they? which is a source of some bitterness between us.
It is, yes. You had to bring that up, didn't you?
I had to bring the Rurik thing up because it really annoyed me in the second edition of RuneQuest where Rurik the Restless, Rurik the Clumsy, it should have been. It rolled a dexterity 4. The lowest gets 4. And whenever we roll characters and I rolled a duff stat, you'd always say, "Well, Rurik had a dexterity 4 and he did all." Yeah. And I used to simmer a bit because I'd rolled a 4 in Constitution. It's not quite the same, is it? But they do kind of acknowledge that, I think. It's a problem, isn't it, this? I'm not sure it really works, because the principle we adopted when I rolled this character is they say you roll 3d6, apart from intelligence and size, which is 2d6, with 2d6 plus 6. You roll 3d6, and if you roll a 1, you can roll it again. Now, that seems on the face of it quite generous, doesn't it? But look what we've got here, a power of 7. I'm no expert with probability. But do you know what? If you roll a 1 and re-roll it, do you know what you can roll? You can roll a 2. And do you know what? A 2. I'm not a mathematician, far from it. But 2's not much better than 1. So
I think that low power gives your character a sense of flavour, in that it's a sense of doom.
I suppose, yeah.
And I don't like to say this, but Rurik did all right, didn't he? He ended up being a Rune.
He did all right, didn't he? He ended up being a Rune Lord, didn't he? Or did he? Did he? Did he really play him properly? Or is it just some fiction they invented for the rules? I think we should be told. No, a minute. Anyway, we'll move on before I get too bitter.
The rest of the steps are really about distributing points onto the skills, aren't they? So occupation and culture and some additional skill boosts. So that's very familiar from RuneQuest 3, but also that element of it is a lot like Call of Cthulhu, isn't it? That you've got a number of points that you can allocate depending on the occupation you choose and some of the choices that you make.
Yeah, that's right. That's quite good as well, because it does that. It brings in that thing of a career path and a life history that does make you a bit better. Not brilliant, but a bit better than you're not going to be sitting there with 15% attack with your battle axe. You might have 40% or something as a beginning character, which is a bit better, is a bit more realistic. Yeah,
and you'll pick up other percentage points from your background as well. So as you're rolling, you pick up additional bits and pieces. So
but there's a couple of other nice touches though. One thing I really really liked is that, I mean, I don't like it because I rolled a charisma of 8, but objectively I do like it that. Spirit magic, the number of spells you can have is dictated by charisma rather than intelligence or anything else. Yeah. And I think that's quite a nice touch, because charisma, in role-playing generally, charisma is the kind of duff stat, isn't it, where no one really cares about charisma. And I think that was particularly true in RuneQuest, because it never seemed to matter much. But actually that makes it matter a lot, doesn't it? Because if like my character, you've got a charisma of 8, that's a problem, because you're only going to be able to carry 8 points of 8 points of spirit magic in your head, aren't you?
Yeah.
Which is not that much, so you're going to be limited in terms of magic, and I think that's kind of a nice touch, really.
The very act of creating this character has got me going and wanting to play the game.
Yes. Oh yeah, it does. I think it does. I think it. I think it does anyway. But whilst we've said people have this anxiety about getting into Glorantha, I think if you're familiar with RuneQuest and if like us you played it a lot in the past and you are familiar with Glorantha, I think you'll really like that character creation because we did, didn't we? We like it because it kind of pushes lots of buttons about Glorantha and gives you a sense of belonging to it, which in the old game you had to find your way through it as a character, but in this you're given a bit in advance, aren't you?
I need to make a confession before I go.
Oh, go on.
I've done an impulsive thing where I bought a load of paraphernalia that I'm not sure I need.
That's not like you, is it?
Well,
what have you bought? Come on. Tell Judge Blythy. Now, you tell me what you bought and I'll tell you whether you need it or not. Go on.
Yeah, you've got your civvies on, so I feel I can open up to you when you're like this.
Yes, you like I say, you tell me and I'll tell you whether you need it.
Right, well, first up, the Q Workshop have brought out some dice, some RuneQuest dice. So I've ordered them.
Why the RuneQuest dice? Explain.
Yeah, because they've got runes on them, and they've also got supplementary dice, some additional dice, which have got hit locations on as well. So,
well, you see, the trouble is, you know 12's chest, you know that, don't you? You know that 10's abdomen. You know that. Why do you need it? You know it.
They're really big. It's really big as well, but it looks really good. A turquoise one I've got.
That's quite good. I pretend I don't like these things, but yeah.
And the other bit of paraphernalia, it's arrived today, Infinity Engine, and it's a strike rank tracker.
What?
It's a strike rank tracker.
What do you need one of them for?
To track the strike rank.
Why do you need to track it?
I must admit.
Wait, no. You see, is it for RuneQuest? Is it the right game you play? I mean, I get the hit location dice. All right, that's kind of. I'll end up buying one of those. I know now I will. I say I won't, but I will. I know I will. Next games convention, I'll see one. That'll be it. I'll buy one. But I still need strike rank.
I was agnostic about it. I must admit that when I heard about it, I thought you don't need a strike rank tracker because you just write it in front of you. Your strike rank when you do anything. And I've always said this, that I'm a bit of a big chunker when it comes to strike rank. I don't believe in getting into the individual phases. I just say what happens at the beginning, sort out what order people do things in the middle, and some things you might do at the end. Yeah. That's the way that it's organised in my brain. But you just look at this. Look at this. It's a beautiful thing. It's a wooden thing with runes on it. How could you not enjoy having that? And I've got tokens as well. Got some tokens, and these.
When we play, then next time we play, we can use that, can't we? And then you'll see why you don't need it.
I will, but I'll use it. I mean, I will lose bits of it, but that's by the by. But
like a cribbage board. What's going on? Like a Glorantha cribbage board.
Yeah, but it's beautiful.
I don't know what cribbage is, by the way.
I don't know what cribbage is.
No, I have no idea what it is, but apparently you play with a board. You may not.
It's something my granddad used to play. But I've also got these argument tokens. So when you choose to cast a spell or invoke a spell, there's all these. Look at them, they're beautiful little tokens with runes on them and everything.
Oh, look! They put runes on everything, haven't they?
They have, yeah.
Someone in marketing's got to stick a rune on it.
Stick a rune on it, yeah.
I've got this tracker thing from Feng Shui. Just stick runes on it. Sell it for Glorantha people.
It's very easy to be cynical, but it is a nice thing to have. It's a nice thing to have.
Why do people have a problem with strike rank? Does it bamboozle people in some way?
There's some people get it down to the minutiae, don't they, of what you're doing in phases. It's that thing where, to me, it's a turn order, but also... Yeah. Also, there's this thing of some people getting to think of what you can do in a round. But that's a secondary function of it, isn't it?
I think Strike Rank and RuneQuest generally are much simpler when you've got a couple of players, because there's a lot of dice rolls and there's quite a lot going on in combat. But I suppose if you had 5 or 6 players and 6 or 7 adversaries that they were fighting, joking apart, maybe you can see why you might want something like that, because it might get very, very complicated particularly when people change their action in a round and go from hitting someone with a broadsword to casting a spell to doing something else. So I suppose our perspective of it is based on it being relatively few players and NPCs acting, whereas if it's bigger than that, it can get a bit tricky, I suppose.
Yeah, and it's a nice thing to have on the table.
It's nice. Well, it'll make you feel better now. I've said that's you can have that. You keep it. You don't have to send it back.
Yeah, no, it's
and
great.
I'm not going to be like your dad and say, "What's this rubbish?" Send it back. Get your money back. You might need it when you've got lots and lots of players.
Well, I'm going to head on to the Glorantha forums now.
You should have told everyone not to do that. Why are you doing that?
I need to work out how to get this pump out of my dishwasher.
You bought one of those practicing dishwashers again. I'm telling you about that. Like the Lunar TV. Doesn't work. You can see the moon on it.
Till next time. Adios. Blythy.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks to Mob for his enthusiastic contribution to this episode. I know that many of you enjoyed the first part. It was a great chat. Thanks, Mob. Of course, another way of discovering RuneQuest is to find someone who's playing it and giving it a go. At the Owl, Bear and Staff in Royal Leamington Spa at the end of September 2018, I'll be running a new yet unpublished adventure, Darkness at Runegate, by Grog Squadder Rich August. And very good it is too. Rich will be running it himself at Grogmeet. Now, both of these events are sold out, but if you make a note in your diaries of the 12th of April 2019, that's the date of the next virtual Grogmeet. I promise to run some RuneQuest then. Virtual Grogmeet was a real success last time, as it introduced lots of people to online play for the first time. But that's a long time off, and I'm currently in negotiations to attend Dragon Meet 2018 in that fancy London, and I'll run a game there. But at the moment it's 60-40 of a no deal. But that could change, depending on my backstop position. Grogmeet, virtual Grogmeet, and this podcast is only possible thanks to the generous crowdfunding of the Grog Squad via Patreon. The Grogzine is in pre-production, and we're adding the Collected Daily Dwarf Volume 3 and the first ever Judge Blythy's Book of Judgments. And to get that, you need to be a Patreon from the end of November 2018 to January 2019, when the hard copies will be sent to you wherever you are in the world. Check out thegrognardfiles.com for more details soon. Thanks to new Patreons. I'll give individual shout-outs next time, as I'm running out of tape on this C90. Now, grab a brew and a hobnob, as before we go, I wanted to finish on a highlight from the past 38 podcasts. Now, I asked the Grog Squad for their favourite moment so far. So, was it the open box insights from a variety of guests, creating a contextual background like the Dead Sea Scrolls from 1980s gaming? No, it wasn't that. Was it Eddie? Eddie, on the money, bargain hunting tips? No, it wasn't that. Was it the Diana Jones award-winning actual play samples that we provide? That's how that works, isn't it? Diana Jones thing. If you do an actual play, then you're an award winner. So, nope. No. Was it the forensic examination of the best of White Dwarf, written with such wit and verve by @DailyDwarf from Twitter? No. Nope, it wasn't that. Over 50 hours of painstakingly compiled gold and the highlight they chose was this bobbins.
There it goes. Go.
Just Blythy rules.
Welcome to the room of role-playing rambling, where I'm joined by my learned friend, Judge Blythy. Fingering his...
Fingering? What? Where are you going there?
Right.
I never agreed to this.
Just Blythy rules.
Welcome to the room of role-playing rambling, where I'm joined by my learned friend, Judge Blythy.
Do we give up? Oh dear me! You got to come on. Get
Fingering.
Stop saying fingering. Stop saying it. Stop saying it. Don't say fingering. What am I fingering?
Adios, amigos.